Quick note before we start. This content is for educational purposes only. We are not promoting the use or purchase of any substances. Our goal is to explain science, regulation, and history. Always follow the laws in your country and consult licensed professionals for any health related questions. Here we are.
Okay.
So, welcome everybody to Eywa Academy. This is a space where we like to explain science, policy making, history around psychedelics, around mental health by experts. So today I have the pleasure to have Rick Doblin. Um, I think that Rick Doblin in this particular industry and space is a really important figure I admire a lot, not just because all of the work he has done, but also because of the energy he has. I see him traveling the world and giving a lot of talks and inspiring a lot of people, and at the same time doing amazing work. So, welcome, Rick. Um,
It's a
it's,
pleasure to be here with you today, really. And my time in Buenos Aires was just wonderful. And whatever we can do to help bring psychedelic research and even a better drug policy over time, we'd like to do that. And I mean, this is just a brief criticism of America, but you know that Trump is blowing up boats in Venezuela and stuff, but he's using the drug war as an excuse to do that, to kill people. That's what happened in the Philippines, that the drug war was used by Duterte to kill people of all sorts, even his political opponents. So what I'm trying to say is that the drug war itself is a fundamental violation of human rights, rights to explore our consciousness, and that the research that we're trying to do is so complicated and people have so many fears because of all the misinformation that governments have put out to justify the drug war. So I'm just sort of framing things in a way that,
yes,
decades and decades and decades, 100 years more of misinformation that people have.
definitely. Misinformation, I would say, stigma, fear, and we all humans at some point repeated information we heard and we didn't validate.
Yeah.
But well, I think that fear, for example, is one of the things that call most people attention, and it's really easy to fall there. That's why the newspapers, maybe there's more like bad news or fear news than good news, because it's what calls more people attention. But well, thank you very much again, Rick, for being here. Would you like to introduce yourself, and then we can start with a few questions?
Yeah. Basically, for the last 53 years, since I was 18 years old, I've been focused on trying to bring psychedelics above ground and to become a psychedelic therapist. So I have two strands of training. One is with Stan Grof, sort of the world's leading LSD researcher, the developer of holotropic breath work. So I've learned about being a psychedelic therapist, and my undergraduate degree is in psychology. But then back in 1987, when I graduated, and I started MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, in 1986, when MDMA was criminalized. And I wanted to work through the FDA. I wanted to do psychotherapy outcome research to show psychedelics had value in highly trained people, in screened patients, in safe environments, that we could really think of them as medicines. But nobody would let me in to a PhD program in clinical psych because MDMA had just been criminalized. So I realized the politics were blocking the science, so I needed to study the politics. So I went to Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and I have my master's and PhD from there in the regulation of the medical use of psychedelics. So on the one hand, I've been trained in helping individuals, and now we're expanding, of course, to group psychotherapy. But the political work I do is trying to change culture, is to help sick public policies. So
Hmm.
that's a parallel strand. And that's why I started out by talking a little bit about the counterproductive and unethical nature of the drug war. So we try to do both, legitimize through medicine and through science, and also try to change drug policy. And so now I'm just turned 72, and I'm really excited that the ideas I had when I was 18 still make sense after all these years to focus on psychedelics.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, just 2 days ago.
This is amazing. I mean, uh, I can't imagine how much you have gone through having founded MAPS in 1986. Uh, I don't know. I just started Eywa 3 years ago, and it feels like a life. So I can't imagine and how many process you must have seen.
Yeah,
Um, but well, I wanted to know a little bit about your story. What
yeah.
drove you to found maps beyond like showing that psychedelics can be safe medicines? Well, we were just talking about more like your personal story.
Yeah.
Would you like to share that anecdote?
Well, yeah, as my wife says, I really like to talk about me. But yeah, so actually, the story was it's about, again, the importance of scientific research and the importance of science and the importance of facts and how much fear there is. So this was actually 1989. And so both my wife and I were at the Kennedy School getting master's degrees. And she had heard that I had a nonprofit before MAPS, started in
Okay.
1984. And that was to prepare to defend MDMA's therapeutic use once the US government moved against it. So, what I was, so she heard that I was interested in psychedelics. And so she said that she wanted to talk to me about a mushroom trip she had in college that she was still thinking about.
Okay.
And actually, to go back a little bit, she had, we were in a class on leadership, and we had to, we were in the same small group, and once a week, somebody had to share their biggest failure as a leader. And her failure was actually working on liberation theology, which is something that's been popularized in Latin America and South America. It's like the preferential option for the poor. It's, Oscar Romero was the priest that was killed in the giving a service, because he was about liberation theology. It's so she'd worked on this project for liberation theology that I was really impressed about. And so I really fell in love with her politics. But then she said she wanted to talk to me about her mushroom trip in college. I thought, maybe there's more going on here. So we went out for lunch. I thought it was a date. She didn't think it was a date. And I'd actually asked her for dinner, and she said, "Oh, let's do lunch instead." So,
Okay.
okay. So at the lunch, we have a wonderful discussion, and she says I really helped her to think about her mushroom trip in different ways. And then she says, I just want to let you know that I would never want to have a real relationship with anybody like you. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I thought I'm a good person. And she said, well, you've said you've done LSD over 100 times. Your chromosomes must be so screwed up that you would have birth defects. And I'm like, oh my God, how are you, a smart woman, believing the stuff? And I said, it may be premature, but let me defend my sperm. They are in good shape. And fortunately, she believed me, and we kept continuing. And that was now, 37 years ago, about.
Wow.
And so apparently I persuaded her, and we have 3 kids, and they all have 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 eyes, and that they're all doing fine. We do like to joke that there is some evidence of brain damage, though, which is sometimes our kids think they're right and we're wrong. That must be brain damage. But anyway, it was just an example of how
Yeah.
of here. So, but I guess what I want to say is that I was born in 1953, and right after, not that long after World War II. And my family is Jewish, and I was raised on stories of the Holocaust. Then I was a young boy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I was like, okay, I could die from in a concentration camp from anti-Semitism, from Hitler and stuff like that. And then, oh no, now I could die from the Russians and Americans blowing up the world. And then it became the Vietnam War, and now I could die from my own country doing things that were terrible. And my parents gave me this incredible gift, which was to say that we will make sure that you're never starving and you always have a roof over your head. That your basic survival is something that we'll take care of. And now you can do whatever you want to do. So I thought, okay, with survival assured, and this wasn't, my own, luxury, this or that, but it was just fundamental survival. Then I could look at all the ways I could die from hatred, anti-Semitism, nuclear war. So I said, what is it that I could do that could contribute to making it a better world? And the fact that in this long generational line, so I was also trained, my great grandfather was a laborer in Poland. My great grandfather was a tailor. My grandfather was a teacher, and he came as an immigrant to the United States with nothing and had a small bookstore. My dad was a doctor, and I was born just at the right time for them to say, okay, we've got enough resources. We'll make sure that you don't starve and you obviously have a place. So I thought, it's this dehumanization of others. It's this way in which we can separate ourselves from others that's the danger. And this was also at the same time that people were going to the moon. And so we're thinking more globally. And I thought, okay, psychedelics are terrible. I believed all the propaganda. But then in my senior year of high school, I read a book, and the author of it, I love the book. And a friend of mine gave it to me. He said the author wrote some of this book while he was on LSD. And I'm like, that's impossible. LSD makes you crazy. It's delusion. It's hallucination. And it was, but it was true. It was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. And that made me really question what I'd learned about LSD. So I think it's this idea that LSD takes you out of your sense of self and helps you feel connected to something bigger than yourself. And if we feel that connection, we should be more respectful of the environment, more appreciating people that are different from us rather than scared of them. So I thought, in this crazy world where there's so much prejudice and so many ways where people are killing each other, this psychedelics could be a tool for peace, that they could help us feel our connections, and they can also help us work through our traumas, our depressions, to see the world in a more clear way. So when I was 18, sort of out of desperation, because this was now 1972, and in 1970, the Controlled Substances Act was passed, psychedelics were criminalized, the research was wiped out all over the world. And I thought, okay, as a way to fight back, why is the government so scared of people doing psychedelics? There must be a good reason. And so maybe a good way to fight back, to create a better world, is to work on psychedelics. And so that was basically the idea I had when I was 18, and it still makes sense now. So my whole life has really been focused on this fortunate support from my family, and then me picking consciousness change as I thought, because if we can change consciousness, that ripples to everything. So just as another moment to kind of criticize Trump, I'll take this opportunity where he's going after wind and solar. So, he's almost pretending as if he is pretending that global warming doesn't matter. It's all short-term thinking. And it's also irrational. And so it's how do we help people respond to it's frightening in a way that humans are able to affect the climate, and that is something that's changing everything. So yeah. I was just in Antarctica, and one of the main things that I came away from that trip was thinking is there's no away anymore. So in Antarctica, there's climate change, there's melting of glaciers, then there's bird flu, then there's microplastics everywhere, so that we are all interconnected. There's no away anymore, and we really need to learn how to live together with each other and with nature. And so for me, psychedelics have been used for thousands of years, and I thought, okay, this is what I'll focus on. And what keeps me going is just every day somebody tells me a story of how psychedelics have helped them. And I know they can be harmful too. It's the context, not the drug, that matters. But I really think that what you're doing with the Eywa Academy, trying to educate people, what we're trying to do is let's clear up a lot of the misunderstandings, because humanity is in a crisis, and we need whatever tools we can get, and we need to think more clearly, and we need to think collectively.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. So I think it's impressive. I really like your story also. Thank you for sharing it. Some minutes ago, I was telling you how one of the news that went out from Eywa's round had a lot of hate on drugs, on psilocybin, on psychedelics in general, and how um, misinformation or fear can be spread so easily from
Yeah.
mouth to mouth without verifying data. Or I mean, there's even some people that have a lot of fear and say like, okay, well, this data is not enough, so what you're doing is not worth it. And I keep on thinking on how today it's really easy to be inside an echo chamber because we have algorithms showing us what we like and just what we like to spend more time on social media. We have a newspaper and news that have more bad news than good news. So if you don't go out from your place, you can do everything from your home. I mean, today the technology is there, it's available to not go away from your home, to not go away from your beliefs. And that, in a sense, I think it's super dangerous in terms of like, it's easy for people to say no to new information. And
Yeah.
there's where I think that psychedelics really can make a change. So for any problematic to solve in the world, you cannot solve it, I think, in my opinion, you cannot solve it from just one perspective. You cannot do just science. You have to do policy making as you did, but you also have to do communications and maybe
Yes.
entertainment, and maybe you should do this information easy for people that don't have a lot of time, that people don't want to read a paper. um so yes, that this is a part of what I think, or I believe, I should do at Eywa, because actually myself, I'm a communicator, I'm not a scientist. Then I did
Yeah.
a master's in business because I realized I wanted to do business. But that's why I think that communications are super important. And
I would not only strongly agree, but say that there's several people that were saying that politics is downstream from culture. What
mm,
that means is that culture influences politics, but culture also influences science. And we also like to say that the regulators, like the FDA needs data, but people need stories. So we really need to communicate to culture through stories. And just to say, I took a class with the fellow that introduced the idea of designated driver. Is that something that's in Argentina, a
yes, of
designated driver?
course, of
Okay.
course.
So that came from America, the idea of designated drivers. And the way they communicated that was through TV shows and movies. They would work with screenwriters and TV writers, and they would have a character that's the designated driver. They would have a bunch of people go out for a party, and one of them say, "Oh, I'm not going to drink. You guys can drink. I'll be the designated driver." So you don't realize you're being educated, but you are being educated. And because it's entertainment, it sinks in even deeper than if it's like a public service announcement or something like that, because you might, question it or resist it. So I think that the ideas in entertainment are really important. And so one of the things I'm wondering is, for TV shows or any things that are made in Argentina, can you get psychedelic storylines in them? Because that is one of the best ways to educate people.
I was writing. I was I was just writing ideas that happened while you were speaking about this. But yes, totally. I think stories are definitely more powerful than just information. Something, my way of saying it was like, it's way more interesting to read a book with vision, no matter what that vision is, no matter if that vision makes you a little bit uncomfortable, but it's funnier than reading a textbook that is just explaining why this cell is doing this and that. Um,
Well,
definitely.
yeah. And actually, so I told you my whole life was changed by a book that was a fictional book, and it just happened to be written by someone who wrote some of it under LSD. But it was that book that changed my whole life.
Wow, it's amazing. Well, something I really wanted to ask you, like 1996, you founded Maps.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just can't imagine
Please.
how many learnings you have.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what are your biggest learnings, and if there is something you would have done differently if you had to start today again?
um, my biggest learning, I guess, is that it really does work when you think about incremental change, that you just really need to have long time frames. So, for example, earlier today, we're talking about the work that you're trying to do in Mexico to help start psilocybin research.
Yeah.
Now, there hasn't been psychedelic research in Mexico for over half a century. And, I went down to Mexico City to speak at the Institute of Psychiatry a couple of years ago. So now, maybe it's more possible to get permission in Mexico. But so this idea of incremental change, we think about it all the time, but it's really, really true. And it's something that you do that you think may have been a failure. Somebody else may eventually be inspired by it, or that maybe you started educating somebody, but that they weren't completely convinced, and then somebody else comes along and now they hear it again. So the value and the reality of incremental change. So now it's 40 years. April 8th coming up is going to be the 40th anniversary of MAPS in 2026. It'll be our 40th year. So what I'm seeing is some of the things that I did 20 years ago. So, for example, when I was on this cruise to Antarctica,
Yes.
there was somebody that I hadn't seen for 35 years, and now he's going to be helping out. So back 35 years, this was in 1989. People may not remember, and certainly if you're in China, they try to ignore it or pretend it never happened. But there was a student-led revolution in Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese government cracked down and massacred hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of students. And one of the student leaders escaped and came to Boston when I was at the Kennedy School of Government. And I organized with him and a few others an international day of fasting for freedom and human rights in China and Tibet. And we got a bill through Congress. We had protests all over the world, and we commemorated the fasting, not the massacre, the nonviolence. We were about the nonviolent resistance. So anyway, I hadn't talked to him for 35 years, and now he's interested in psychedelics. He was on this cruise about psychedelics, and now we're going to try to see how we work together. So this idea of incremental change is something. The other thing, and I'll say this is one of the biggest, my first thought was that this will be easy to fund through philanthropy, because look at all these people that are doing ecstasy, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if we, of people, I mean, millions of people, tens of millions of people now. And I thought, if we just get each of them to send us $10, we'll have all the money we need. And then I realized that they would rather buy more ecstasy with the $10. And they never thought we would succeed anyway. They were on a different track, sort of, the recreational use versus the kind of research, which is normally left to pharma companies. So what I learned then is that you really, if you're running a nonprofit, you have to really both ideally find a lot of small donors, but you have to find ways to motivate people to contribute. And we have a much greater culture of philanthropy in America than we do in Argentina or much of the world, in Europe. Yeah. So we're benefited from that. But I learned really that you have to show people how it's linked to their life in some way. So one of the biggest successes, in a way, both in culture change and also in fundraising, was at Burning Man. So a lot of people go to Burning Man, and it's a lot of our wealthy tech people, and a lot of people are doing psychedelics there. And so we also want to build a post-prohibition world. How do we do that? Because in a post-prohibition world, it's not just psychedelics for medicine or psychedelics for religion. It could be psychedelics for celebration, for a rave, for a dance party. But there will be more problems when people are not prepared, not supervised, not screened. So how do we envision a post-prohibition world where we deal with the problems? Yeah. And that's where we do psychedelic harm reduction. So we call it the Zendo Project at Burning Man. We bring hundreds of therapists and people comfortable with psychedelics, and they help people with difficult trips. people who did it for fun, and then it gets more
Yeah.
complicated, and then they need support. So I think what I learned how important it is, then the people at Burning Man could say, I see that the scientific research and the therapy relates to our life.
Yeah,
And
and that it's the setting and not just the drug.
exactly. It's really more about the setting than about the drug.
I think
So
that that's a really creative way on showing people like, okay, let's get in Burning Man and let's show like really show how this is working.
yeah,
Wow.
how do we build a culture in our own way where it demonstrates to the world that a different approach can be possible? So we have to do it ourselves. We can't just ignore the fact that a lot of people are going to have difficult trips. I think
Yes.
if the one thing that I would have done differently is more recently. So what I eventually did, MAPS was started in 1986. And it wasn't until 2014 that we were making a lot of progress with the research. We were in the phase 2 studies with MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD. We were getting good results. And I realized I thought I knew everything about drug development. That was what my PhD was in. I studied from the leading lawyer in America, in the world, basically, for the FDA regulations. And I didn't learn until 28 years after I started MAPS something really fundamental, which was that there's incentives for developing drugs that are off patent. So MDMA was invented by Merck in 1912. It was it's in the public
Incentives of
domain.
patents.
It's off patents. I learned about MDMA in 1982, but it was used as a therapy drug before that. So MDMA for therapy was also in the public domain. So I thought it would be generic and it would only be funded by donations. And then 28 years later, through kind of an accident, I learned that there was a loophole that pharma companies don't use because they're always going for patents, but that there were incentives for developing drugs that were off patent called data exclusivity. And what that meant is that you had exclusive use of your data. And now it's in the US for 5 years. In Europe, it's 10 years, but you can have a monopoly position. So that meant that I could tell a different story to donors. If you can make us donate us enough money that we can make MDMA into a medicine, then for a period of years, we can sell it for more it costs us. We can make money and we can use that for more research. So I didn't want to do it in a traditional for-profit way, because when you look at pharma companies, they're more about money than about helping people. And I think Spravato, ketamine, is one of the best examples,
Yeah.
because it's approved without therapy. And when you add therapy, it lasts longer, it works deeper, and you don't need as much ketamine. But when you do it without therapy, you need to buy more ketamine, and the pharma companies don't make it. So it's not done in the right way. So we created a public benefit pharma company that was 100% owned by the nonprofit. But later on, we had to take in investors. And what I've seen now, and this is the biggest mistake that I made, and it's something for you all to consider, is that we didn't articulate exactly what we meant by public benefit and then quantify it. And maybe you learned this in business school, but we needed to link the metrics related to public benefit to salaries, bonuses, and stock options. Properly incentivize the management. But once we started taking in investors and separating the company, public benefit just became like greenwashing. It's like a word. They're not actually acting in that way. But we didn't create a way that would force that more, which was these quantified public benefits and linking to compensation. So I never thought that, we would lose control of the pharma company. So I didn't prepare ahead of time early enough. And when we started trying to do that, it was too late. And the people at the pharma company said, no, we're not going to pay attention to this. Forget about public benefit.
Okay, I understand. Perfect. So you discovered this kind of mode you had, which was like the data. I mean, you were doing a generic, but you said, okay, anyways, this generic has data exclusivity if I'm the first to put it in the market.
Yeah.
But then the mistake was that the managers of the company weren't properly incentivized to carry this.
Yes, and the ownership shifted from the nonprofit to the investors.
Yeah, I totally understand. Well, so you kind of mixed some of my questions, because um, I heard a really interesting conversation between you and Christian Angermeyer,
Ah,
which
yeah.
is like the face of nonprofit and the face of for profit. It was really interesting, but my question was more like taking into account like the different incentives, policies that have to be done. Also taking into account that these are medicines that can be used for illnesses, but also for personal growth at some point,
Yes,
or
yes.
for prevention. So what is the perfect framework for this? Because if you're going to do this just to cure an illness, and you're going to put a patent just for an illness, just for prescription, I mean, it could be a way to start, but also it could be a way of incentivizing that the market moves in certain way. So I really wanted to know your perspective on this.
Yeah. So I think that there's no one right way. It has to be all the ways. So, for example, one of the things that's probably not happening at all in Argentina, but is happening throughout America, is psychedelic churches.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing. So, in my favorite one, and I had a really fun time at Burning Man because I was giving I give lots of talks at Burning Man. So this last Burning Man, I was giving a talk, and I was saying my favorite psychedelic church is called the Church of Ambrosia. It's a church in Oakland, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. They have 130,000 members.
Wow.
They sell 90 pounds of mushrooms every month. And as I was describing it, the guy who started the church was there in the audience. It was really great. And he's a friend of mine. So what they're doing, and they give mushrooms to people. They don't do them together in the church. You get mushrooms and then you do it at home, and you get a book, How to Have a Spiritual Experience with Mushrooms. But there are hundreds of psychedelic churches throughout America. So, and they're not only for plants, but for MDMA, for LSD, for synthetics as well. Now, the reason that they're going is that the rise of the religious right, the Christian religious right, have made it so that you can now do all sorts of things you can get public money for your schools. You can discriminate against people who are gay because your religion says gay people are bad. So the rise of the religious right has made it so religious freedom has extended so much so that the police don't want to go after psychedelic churches. So we have hundreds of psychedelic churches and probably millions of people that are members of these different churches getting access to psychedelics. Now, that's one way. The other way is through medicine. And medicine, I think, is really, really important. So science and medicine are what change cultures' minds. You need to do the science first. The thing about the medicine, then, is that if you get it through the FDA, then insurance companies will pay for it, or national health insurance. In America, there's a lot of state-level reforms that are happening. The Oregon Psilocybin Initiative. So in the state of Oregon, 15,000 people have already received psilocybin, even though it's not FDA approved yet. The problem is that people have to pay for it themselves. It's not covered by insurance. But still, there's trained guides that have to be trained in certain ways to provide access to people. And there are different training if it's for personal growth, as you mentioned, or if it's for treating depression or anxiety or psychiatric illness. All right, then there's legal access to people without any kind of disorder or any reason other than they just want to celebrate. They just want to have a wonderful time. There's research we're getting ready to start for MDMA for couples therapy. MDMA is great for people to fall in love. It really promotes more honest discussions. You're a better listener. You're more connected, but it's not a disorder. So I think that we will be hiring lawyers to go after the FDA because there's nothing in the law that blocks them from approving substances for personal growth or for preventative medicine or for wellness, not just sick care, but well care to try to prevent sickness. And that should be covered by insurance as well. So I think that the issue is not the substance, it's the relationship that you have with the substance. And there's a gradation of different kinds of relationships. One is you're doing it in a medical setting with therapists. That's the safest, and that should be covered by insurance. Then in psychedelic religions, that's your personal growth. You should be doing that, but that's not covered by insurance or anything. That's just, you do it on your own. But then also for anybody that just wants it for going to a rave or listening to a concert or going to a festival. All of that should be legal. We should bring it up from the underground where it's the riskiest, the most dangerous, and also the most corrupt. So we need to move these things. And so many governments around the world make a fortune selling drugs. So, because they're illegal, it goes to the wrong parties. It should be really legal and tax money, and, governments can be corrupt too, but it still should be above ground. So I think we need all of those avenues. But I do think that from a strategic, political, scientific point of view, things begin with scientific research. Because how was I able to convince my girlfriend on our first date, that my chromosomes were not screwed up? I could show her science, and then she would believe that. But there's so many people that believe MDMA causes holes in the brain, or MDMA damages the brain cells, or all these things that, psilocybin or LSD makes you go crazy. That we need scientific research. That gets the key opinion leaders, that gets you moving towards, and we also need to respond to people suffering. So where we go for people that are suffering, that have not gotten the help they need from traditional pharmaceutical medicines, if we can help those people, and then if they tell their stories, that's where people start changing their minds. So I think what's been complicated about MAPS is that we have this dual agenda of both medicalization and legalization.
Yeah.
And the risks are different, the benefits are different, but they both make sense, and they both have to be justified on their own. So for medicine, we need the scientific data. For legalization, we need data about how counterproductive the drug war is, and all the money we spend on prisons and violence and corruption. And so it's different arguments for different things. But I do think that growing up in a culture that has all these fears and misinformation, like my kids went to the DARE program. Okay, so here's a funny story, just to show you the fear. So my youngest daughter went to college, and I gave her some marijuana to bring to college for her to help meet people. So in her first week of orientation, she met some girls, and they decided that they would smoke some marijuana together. But they got busted by the campus police. And so she had to go through counseling. And in the counseling, they said to her, why do you hate yourself? Because if you're using marijuana, you obviously hate yourself because it's a terrible poison and you're poisoning yourself. And it just was like unbelievable that the way that we had tried to influence young people is through fear, through misinformation. And then the way she got out of it was hilarious, because they wondered, where'd you get this marijuana? Well, she said, don't tell my parents. They're going to be so mad at me. Don't tell my parents. My parents will punish me.
No.
All the punishment I need. Don't tell my parents. So, but it's
Crazy.
just,
And that's where your brain is more neuroplastic, so you're kind of like instilling fears on kids' brains and adolescents in general.
And what kind of lessons did you get in school about drugs?
Well, I went to a Catholic school, a nun school, so it wasn't just drugs, it was what you did. It was, of course, alcohol. It was sexual practices. It was a little bit of everything. I can't say it was so restrictive, because it wasn't. But I think that what was more restrictive was like, it was a just girls' school. And I think that what was restricted and what I was bullied for is that my mom was super open about like me having fun and me inviting like guys and friends to pregame at my place before going out. So it was like, oh, Vicky's mom allows her to do pre-games with alcohol at her place. Oh, this is so bad. But yeah, so it was like all the moms of the school were like mad at my mom, and at another mom, my best friend's mom, because it wasn't just me. But yeah, I mean, this cultural thing of like restricting, it was, and the guilt, because there was a lot about guilt. If you do this, you should feel guilt. But when you saw like the other girls, many of those other girls were like having a lot of fights with their moms and dads. Many of those other girls were like sneaking out at night, like without telling their parents. uh, I don't know. I think it was positive, and also like if you grow with fear, it's like, oh, I should never touch this, and the first time you touch it, is it will be like how I will handle it. So I don't know. Yeah, it was restrictive. Um, but luckily my parents let me like do things, and they preferred me to do whatever I had to do at home and
Mm.
being cared of, rather than having to sneak out or doing it on the streets, or some other place where I couldn't be like safe. um yeah,
Wow.
that's true.
Yeah, that's I wonder if the way that you were raised has sort of influenced what you're doing now. It sounds like you've got really good support from your family.
Probably. Well, yeah, and then my mother suffered a really severe depression
Oh,
when I was like 14 years old. It was like the peak. And there I saw her like trying many antidepressants and different antidepressants. And then she had to be hospitalized. So I had to move with my father. So yeah, it definitely like marked my story in some way. But when I realized the potential of psychedelics and healing in a different way, what I instantly thought, it was like, wow, so many years my mother could have accessed another kind of healing.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think that is, of
You know,
course, yeah.
I had a very similar thing with my grandmother. That she was wonderful. I was very close to my grandmother, but um, when she was in her late 70s, early 80s, she went into a deep, deep depression. And she got electroshock therapy several times. It didn't help her. She got all these antidepressants. It didn't help her. And I said to my family, let's give her MDMA because nothing else is working. And my family was a little bit weird about it. But because what I mean is they said, even though nothing else is working, it's illegal. And we only want you to do this if it's legal. And I could never get permission from the government because MDMA had just been made illegal. And so I'll never know if it could have helped her. But she ended up stopping eating and drinking and died because the depression was so strong. I did one day take MDMA and spend the day with my grandmother as a way because I figured I'll do it and try to bring her out of her depression. And there was just a remarkable experience because um, basically I learned a family secret that nobody knew that she shared with me. So what had happened was she said, I just want to die. I don't want to leave my room. I don't want to see my old friends. Life's a misery. I've accomplished everything I want to accomplish. There's nothing left for me to do. Life's a burden. I just want to die. And she would go on and on and on like that. But because I was on MDMA, I didn't tell her I was on MDMA because I didn't want to distract her. But I heard, you accomplished everything you want. That's terrific. Let's celebrate. I haven't accomplished everything I want. You accomplished everything you want. You were married to my grandfather for 49 years before he died and everything. So it kind of shifted the mood. And then she said, well, there is one thing. And she went back and she came out with a book. And she said that she'd saved this book for 60 years. This was a wedding present that she got and it was from a guy. She was in Palestine. Actually, my family built this. My great grandparents and my grandmother, they lived in Palestine in 1923 and 24, and before that. And so my grandmother had a romance with somebody that they didn't like, and so they shipped her back to America. They came from America to Palestine, and
Wow.
now nobody knew of this romance before my grandfather, but the book was a wedding present and it had a note and a rose in it from
Oh,
this guy. And so not only did it help me explain why I have all these Israeli relatives and why we're here because they sent her back to America, but it also really showed me that maybe, she maybe if she'd gotten MDMA herself, maybe it would have changed things. And I feel like part of the motivation for me is that, like your mother depressed, or my grandmother depressed, is that when it happens in your family, you'll do anything to help them, and it's just terrible. And if MDMA or LSD or psilocybin can be helpful for depression,
Yeah,
people are suffering so unnecessarily. And so I just want to keep working to make sure that no other people suffer unnecessarily, like my grandmother and your mother.
definitely. And also like, um I have been really near some people that have taken antidepressants, and they no longer felt the pain, but no longer felt the joy.
Right, right.
And a friend of mine committed suicide this year. She was on antidepressants, and it's like really also really hard to help, really hard to help, because at some point they don't want to be helped. At some point they want to be alone. And for the one that it's not that near to the situation, like a normal friend, it's like, I don't want to get on this person's life, and this person doesn't want me, but I know this person is not doing right. So if you are able to heal from within, like changing how you really really feel and think
Yeah.
about things, yeah, I mean that, as you said, that shifts everything. um
I'm
yeah,
so
it shifts
sad. Um,
perspectives.
did you have a feeling ahead of time that your friend might actually commit suicide?
Not really, not really. I wasn't that close.
Mhm,
But I also had like the feeling that it was, that life was heavy for her.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's possible to help people process difficult emotions. I mean, that's the whole point about psychedelic therapy, is that it's for helping people more effectively process difficult emotions so that they're not oppressed by them, but they can learn from them.
Totally, totally, definitely. And Rick, one last question, and we wrap up. I don't want to steal more of your time, but I really
Don't
want.
it's stealing my time. I'm so glad to be talking to you, because as we're saying, really, public education is the key, because everything flows from that. Culture will determine politics. Politics determines what science you can do and determines the drug war. So anyway, you're not stealing my time. I'm glad to speak with you.
Thank you. No, I'm having such a great time, honestly. And what I really like asking is, what do you want to see in the next 10 years?
Okay. So I would like to see, I think what's going to happen within the next year is that FDA will approve some approach, some preliminary approach for MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD. Within the next 1 to 2 years, FDA will approve psilocybin for treatment resistant depression and for depression. There's already thousands and thousands of ketamine clinics in the United States. So what I would like to see is thousands and thousands and thousands of clinics where people are trained to administer ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, eventually ibogaine, 5-MeO, DMT,
Yeah,
where we psychedelic therapists that are cross-trained in all the different modalities. But what I'd also like to see in 10 years, because what I've just described, I think will start in the next couple of years in America, is for it to globalize. So that's what I'm working on mostly, is how do I globalize access? And I've been talking about it in more high trauma, low resource countries. We're trying to do work in Lebanon, in Rwanda, in Somaliland, in South Africa, in Bosnia, in Ukraine. We've trained 80 Ukrainian therapists. So in the next 10 years, I would like to see widespread use of psychedelic psychotherapy covered by insurance companies all over the world, and overall kind of a elevation of humanity's mental health when we think about it. So I'm very interested in Bhutan. So the country of Bhutan has created gross national happiness measure. So it's a really interesting way to measure happiness, and it's better than gross national product. It's better than measuring the economics, because what are the economics for? Trying to make you happy and have all the support and things that you need. So I would like to also develop gross national trauma measure. So just to speak about Argentina, when I was in Buenos Aires and we go into the main square, you see the memorial to the women of the plaza,
Yeah.
from the Civil War, from all the dictatorship. So there's so many people in Argentina that still have trauma from that.
Yeah.
There's so many people that have multi-generational trauma. So I would like to get a measure, gross national trauma, apply it to different countries, and then over the next 40 or 50 years, you just asked me for 10 years, but 10 years is the beginning of this.
Yes,
definitely.
definitely.
And then see, can we really reduce the burden of trauma on humanity as a whole? And one of the researchers we work with, Rachel Yehuda at Mount Sinai University in New York and Bronx, VA, she's done studies with Holocaust survivors and their children and identified an epigenetic mechanism by which traumas are passed from parents to children through these epigenetic mechanisms. And there's preliminary evidence that when you do successful therapy, you can change these epigenetic markers. So we can interrupt multi-generational trauma. It's incredible.
Yes.
So I'll say one of the most amazing things that I had, the meetings that I had when I was in Argentina, when in Buenos Aires, was with this woman whose aunt and uncle live outside of Mexico City. And they're underground MDMA therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And what they specialize in is working with couples before they conceive a child to try to help them work through their traumas and work through their emotional issues so that they will change these epigenetic markers in their brain. And then when they actually conceive a child, it'll be happier.
Wow.
And that's what I learned about this couple that specializes in helping couples prepare to be parents by working through their emotions. Amazing. So what I would like to see in 10 years is a lot more of that too. When people are romantically involved and they're thinking maybe they're ready to have a baby, let's give them psychedelic therapy first.
Wow, I think that's so evolved because whenever I'm speaking with people, I don't know, in Mexico or something, to like be approved for a really specific essay on like treatment resistant repression, let's say, you go for that because it's like, come on, regulators, let me do this. I mean, nothing else is working for these people. At least we should do this. So whenever I think about like, let's do psychedelic assisted therapy before having a baby, I think like, wow, this is the future. Like we're starting here, we're trying to open the doors, but it would be beautiful that we get there.
Yeah. Yes. Also, I would say when people are 12 or 13 for rites of passage, I think traditional cultures that have successfully integrated psychedelics use them as people go through puberty to really understand the new world that's opening up for you.
Wow.
And to do these transitions. So I think there's all sorts of different ways. I also think we eventually want to work with people in prisons, before or right after they get released, to work through their trauma so they're more likely to try to help a successful life. We want to work with soldiers. But a lot of the soldiers in America who are volunteers come from a history of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That makes them, when there is trauma in their job in the war, then they're even more likely to get PTSD. So we should be working with police and prison guards and first responders who also see all sorts of trauma. So that's the vision for the future. And I think the more that we can start implementing it in small ways, but the way you're describing it is really right about how you go treatment-resistant depression. You go to where the suffering is, where there's no other options, and you say, maybe we can come here and be helpful. And that's where permission can start.
Yeah. And coming back to the beginning of our conversation, you were speaking of increasing like uh, don't I mean never staying at the short term vision, rather like
Yeah.
long term vision. And what I was thinking as you were speaking is how important is that the ones that believe in this now think about the platforms to make this a platform. I mean, not just to stay in one country or in one study, because well, we're going to die eventually. Maybe
Yeah.
at 120, but we're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. We really need to think multi-generational
Yeah,
in that way.
definitely. Yeah, that inspires me a lot. Like, the forward thinking, it's really nice, but it's also really great. It's really nice also seeing like the small wins
Yeah.
for the students.
I think that's really critical, is the big vision and the incremental change.
Yeah.
And if you can sort of be in both places, like I really want more. I want this beautiful world where we all love each other and we're not killing each other. And yet I'll be happy if one person I talk to says, "Oh, I thought LSD caused chromosome damage, but now I see it's not that way."
Definitely, definitely. Well, Rick, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your work and for inspiring me. I think that you are a person that inspires people a lot in general. You're bringing a lot of knowledge and a lot of courage as well to this industry, and that is amazing.
Wow. And I'm so glad that we're sort of both working with some of the same people in Mexico to try to start psilocybin research for the first
We
time in
will
Mexico.
do it, and then we will see this video again, and it will
Yes,
be fun.
that'd be great. That'd be great.
Well, thank you very much, Rick.
Okay, terrific. And by the way, if anybody there who's listening wants help to try to start psychedelic research in Argentina, Uruguay, Mexico, they could write to me at rick@maps.org, and I'll have staff helps me with the emails, and we'll try to help.
Of course, I will add the email on the caption of the video.
Okay.